Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be flipping through and sharing my thoughts on the Interstellar Species book for Starfinder. This was sent to me by Paizo for the purposes of doing this video, so I do want to thank them for sending this to me. I really do appreciate it. Starfinder was actually my real introduction to to Paizo and their products. I did have like the first edition Pathfinder core rulebook, but I rarely ever used it. This was the first system that really got me hooked on the company, so I really love the Starfinder system, and I do want to start dedicating more time to it here in 2023. Now, even though this was sent to me for review, as is always the case, they are not scripting the video or demanding to pre-screen it or anything along those lines. They'll get to see the video at the same time as everybody else, and as is always the case, the opinions that I express in this are 100% my own. So this is the latest book for the Starfinder role-playing game at the time that I am recording this video. I received this shortly before the Christmas break, but just didn't get around to being able to really focus on it in any videos. So I want to spend some time now in 2023 to do that. It does retail for $44.99 US. And it includes a new class, the Evolutionist Character class, able to transform their body to adapt to different situations, an in-depth look at 25 fan-favorite playable species, tools for creating your own playable species, including their appearance, culture, and abilities, and a vast gallery of versatile NPCs like assassins, explorers, investigators, and sports stars, each ready to be included in any campaign. So I'm not going to go through the entirety of the abilities that the Evolutionist class gets. If you do want me to do a separate video detailing the class in full and discussing all the different abilities that they get, I will be more than happy to do that, but I just want to kind of show what's in the book and be a little bit more general as far as that goes, just because it would take quite a bit of time to go through an entire class, but I am more than willing to do a separate video on it if it's something that you guys might be interested in. Now, on the inside cover, we actually have a little bit of different artwork from what we normally have in the Starfinder books. Normally, Starfinder will have the Pact World's solar system in the inside front and back cover. Some books, though, have made changes to that, formula. For example, the Near Space book actually had the Veskarium solar system instead. And here we have sort of a height comparison for a few different types of species, which again, there's some really cool looking stuff in here. I always loved the creativity that Starfinder has. Just some really off-the-wall, unique and interesting stuff in here. My two favorites, though, of this sort of cover art here, inside cover art, has to be the bear with the sunglasses. That just looks super cool. And the little plant creature there reminds me of the Leshies from Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which are probably my favorite ancestry in Pathfinder 2e, just because some of the designs are super unique and interesting. So here we have another one of those bear humanoids. This one looks to be some form of athlete. Our table of contents, and again, just some bizarre looking creatures, almost a biomechanical looking thing here with like the tubes, which look like part of its body, the dome there. And of course, you gotta have a space jellyfish, right? Like no science fiction or science fantasy system is complete without a space jellyfish. So just going through the first section we have are on the classes. So we do get some new abilities for pre-existing classes, as well as the Evolutionist class. So again, I'm not going to go through the entirety of the class here, but just some of the high points they do get for their health systems. They get stamina points equal to 6 plus their con modifier every level, starting with first and every level thereafter, as well as 6 hit points per level. Stamina is sort of a separate pool of health that always gets drained first before you go into actual hit point damage, unless some sort of ability allows you to bypass stamina. Stamina points can be regained much quicker and in full after a certain period of rest and spending of a resolve point. Whereas hit points, they do sort of heal a lot more slowly. I think it's like 1 point per level per day or something like that. So you have like two different pools of health. One is your actual physical hardiness, and the other is just sort of your resilience, if that makes sense, your ability to recover from being like sort of winded and bumps and bruises and minor, lacerations, stuff like that. Whereas the actual hit points is when you take an actual like serious wound. So I do like the way they kind of break that down. They also get 8 plus their intelligence modifier skill points per level. So a class that's about being able to adapt to situations and being good in various types of situations they may find themselves in. Makes sense that they would have good skills. They get an adaptive strike ability. This is the only one I'm really going to go into in any sort of detail. But they also gain like mutation points that they can use in combat. So it's something that kind of can build from round to round, so they can get more and more powerful abilities if they spend their mutation points in order to do that. Again, if you want me to go over the class in more detail, I will be more than happy to do a separate video on it. But with the adaptive strike, it's essentially a physical change to your body that you choose at first level, and it takes on the form of a natural attack. And it can be either a melee attack or ranged attack, and it can be energy based. So it can do like acid, cold, fire, or electric damage. Or it can be physical and deal like bludgeoning, slashing, or piercing. And the attack, essentially something that you can always have on you. You can never be disarmed. Like thunder attacks don't work against it. And they have a fixed amount of damage that it deals, starting at a d6 at first level, and eventually getting all the way up to 8d10 by the time you reach 20th level with the character. So again, just a really cool class. They have just some really interesting abilities. Like I said, I just like the fact that they kind of have the ability to modify themselves. The mutation abilities are really cool. Their ability to gain mutation points, they can do so naturally, or they can do things like drain their enemies so that they can gain mutation points that way as well. Again, just a really cool class concept, which, like I said, I'll be more than happy to go over in a separate video here. But you can see they get quite a few abilities, and we got the different themes to go along with the evolutionist as well. Which is really cool. I love the Death Touch Goblin there. That looks pretty awesome. The Eldritch Champion, this guy again. I think it's the Shrian race species in Starfinder. Again, really cool stuff. Then we got some new things for different existing classes. So we have the Biohacker, which again is sort of a way of modifying yourself or modifying others, which is again kind of cool stuff. You got the Envoy, which is essentially the Starfinder version of the Bard, so they get some new abilities there as well. The Mechanic, when I ran Starfinder pre-pandemic, was actually kind of interesting is that each of the players essentially made their characters on their own, and then they showed up to, because I was running this in public, they had all showed up to the table with the characters that they made before we started the very first game session. And I had 4 players, I think it was, and 3 of them decided to make mechanics. And they kind of abused their drones that they made to the point where they kind of used them like minesweepers. So I don't think any of them had their drone survive the first like session or two before they were destroyed and had to be rebuilt. So just kind of cool. I always liked the mechanic. That was kind of a cool class. The Nanocyte, I don't remember much about this class, if I can be completely and totally honest. But I think they use like nanobots to again modify themselves or others. So again, cool stuff there. The Operative. So the Operative is effectively the Starfinder version of the Rogue. And they got some, again, interesting new abilities here. So specializations, they can be a bully or a diplomat. They have operative exploits, which again are kind of like rogue special abilities. So some cool new stuff there. The Precog, which I believe they can sort of see into the, like, they can basically see a certain amount of time into the future, which can help them like protect against certain attacks or prevent certain things from happening. Again, it's been a little while since I've looked at that class. And then we got our Soldier, which is essentially the warrior, the fighter for Starfinder. So again, they get some new stuff there, and it's always just great to have extra abilities that you can choose for your classes. And again, the way that Starfinder works, it's not quite as customizable as Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Remember, this took place between Pathfinder's 1st and 2nd Edition. But you do get to sort of build your character using an array of options rather than relying solely on just static abilities. They have the ability to choose quite a few different like class features kind of things. So again, some really cool stuff there. And then we got the species. So we have all the ones that are included here. We have the Aasimar, the Android, the Borai. That's weird. The Bracken. Contemplative. I love the Contemplatives. They're basically just this. I mean, I think they're small size, but they're essentially like 90% brain. And then they just have this almost vestigial body kind of hanging from below the brain, and they are more like a psychic, telekinetic type of species. And then we got the Bernari, which are otter people, and my family and I, we follow. I think it's Katsumet. It's a Japanese channel, but they have it's a family that has a pair of otters, and it's some of our favorite stuff to kind of watch together. So again, it's a really cool species here, and it does give you actually like little descriptions of them. So if you're just trying to think of something that you may want to play, you can sort of go through. If a picture catches your attention, then you can sort of look at the basic description of it to see if it's something that you might want to play. So for example, the Kish. Kish are adaptable, three-eyed survivalist with powerful frames and sharp-toothed mandibles, kind of almost a little predator-like there. They live in the ruins of their ancestor civilization. You've got this thing, Ixtongi. I think I'm bad at pronouncing this kind of stuff, but they're slender reptilian bipeds with wide set eyes, retractable tongues, and barbed stingers who can climb and change their coloration. So again, you just get some pretty cool descriptions there. So this book does actually cover quite a bit. We do have the custom species builder, so these are some guidelines to keep in mind if you wanted to create your own unique species, including some tables that you can roll on for options, or even if you don't want to roll on it, you could just pick and choose. But yeah, it goes over quite a bit of information that you want to keep in mind, like what their homeworld is, their life cycle. That almost reminds me of the trilobite from Prometheus, which makes me a little bit sad. Oh, we got another one there. This one looks like he's kind of been worn down by the daily grind a little bit, to be completely and totally honest. But again, it's just kind of cool to see the way that they, kind of adapt things. And then we got our actual species, and they get a little bit of coverage here too. So you get some abilities for them, including some equipment for some of them. Again, which is just kind of cool to see, because if you're playing, or as a game master, if you want to introduce some of these species into your game but make them feel like they're different and kind of stand out, then you can equip them with their specific cultural equipment, as opposed to like the standard stuff from like Armory or the core rulebook. Here we've got their ability score adjustments, their hit points, their size and type, some of the abilities that they gain there as well. And you actually get some really cool just information about them as well. So this one talks about their religion. So they may be a religious kind of species, which again is kind of interesting. I'm not going to try to say all the names for these things because it's just a lot too. Some of them are pretty interesting. But again, we also have, so for this one, we've got, instead of equipment, they actually have like biotech augmentations, because in Starfinder, you can physically alter your body with biotech, things, pieces of, equipment that you can put onto your body. I think they essentially take like body slots that you might be able to use for equipment, but they're permanent. And again, it's just, something that if you're running a science fiction or science fantasy role-playing game, you gotta have like, cybernetic technology, right? There's the contemplative, there's the big, giant, juicy brain with the little itty-bitty bug body floating beneath it. Actually, I really liked, when I was running Starfinder, I was running the Dead Suns adventure path, and one of the NPCs that the players had to deal with, I think it was in the 2nd chapter of the 6, but I think they were at a university, and they had to deal with this, this contemplative, and they are they can be a little full of themselves, being just a big giant, brain creature. They do tend to believe themselves to be a little bit, superior. They also get like +4 to their intelligence, so they are good if you want to play like a technomancer. Or I think a mystic is also a good one for them as well. And yeah, so they get their physical attributes are not good, but they get +4 in intelligence, +2 to charisma, and then -2 to strength and con. They only get 2 hit points though, because, I mean, they're a brain, so they're not going to be the most physically hardy kind of things. And again, because these tend to focus more on the spellcasting classes, we actually get some new spells. Then we got the Dragonkin, so if you just want to play a draconic character, you have the option to do that there as well. And then you've got some alternate abilities for their breath weapons, or some feats that you can take that are specific to this particular species. The Formian, so we got the Ant People, which is always cool to see. This guy. So again, each of the species in here, in addition to being given their game stats for you to play them as a player or for you to use them as a game master to create the characters for them, it always gives you a little bit something extra. So like I said, these ones tend to focus more on the Solarian class, which is a martial class. They're kind of like monks, except they revere the sun and they draw their powers from the sun. So this one, this species has a lot of psi crystals that they can use to sort of augment their weapons. So again, cool stuff there. The Callow, I believe they're an aquatic species. Yeah, they do have a swim speed. Yeah, that makes sense. Got the Trident there. Some companion creatures, and then we got the Kobold. I love how dignified that kobold looks, which is pretty awesome. So again, just some cool stuff, some new alternate abilities, just some things that you can use to sort of differentiate your version of that species that you're playing from others. The Noir, that's the name of them. Noir, they're like the Minotaur type folk, and again, I love Minotaurs. One of the first characters that I remember making when I got into RPGs was actually a Minotaur fighter, so I always kind of liked the Minotaurs. The Pathra, which is like a cat folk type of race. The Sassanoid? I don't know, it's kind of, again, it's just really bizarre, interesting looking creatures. We got this guy, which kind of reminds me almost of, in Super Mario Odyssey, there's this one enemy that's surrounded by a bubble of water. That's just, for some reason, that reminds me of that one. At least that picture. Then we got the Raxolite. So these, again, I think they're essentially Leshies, just under a different name, with like the Leshies essentially being like the ancestors of the this version of the species here. And again, that's just so, I don't know, I love it. It's so like kind of like just goofy and kind of adorable looking, but I just absolutely love it there. Like the hair is actually like the dandelion, the fluffy stuff that grows on them. So again, just some really cool stuff in here. Again, not even going to try to pronounce it, but these are like your jellyfish people, because again, you need a jellyfish space monster if you're going to be in like a science fantasy RPG. I think it's legally required. Then we got the SRO. So these are, you can play as robots or androids in Starfinder. So it's kind of cool to see some different types of these creatures as well. So they have different body types, and again, just really cool. I love the designs of a lot of these things. The Trox. So those are, like I believe that's a Trox there. And these guys are pretty big. I think they're large size. You can play large size species in Starfinder. They actually do allow you to do that. So yeah, they are large monstrous humanoids, +2 to strength, +2 to con, -2 to dex. 8 hit points. So these things are pretty strong and beefy. And actually, what's kind of interesting is they got spell redirection as one of their sort of features here that's associated with them. And what's kind of interesting It almost reminds me of like the reflective carapace on the Tarrasque for some reason, because it sort of uses like their like chitinous shell maybe to redirect spells, or that's the flavor that I'm attaching to it. But I do see like the chitinous body and thinking of the like the Tarrasque, and anyway, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Then we have the Uplifted Bear. So uplifted animals are essentially awakened versions. So they were like normal creatures at one point, but they were given like awareness and sentience, I guess, intelligence, that turned them into, again, more like a humanoid as opposed to just a regular run-of-the-mill animal. And again, they have mysterious origins. One of the cool things about Starfinder, if you've never played it, it does take place in the same universe as the Pathfinder, like first and second edition. However, it is set sort of in a futuristic time period, and there was an event that happened about 300 years before the beginning of like the Starfinder like current timeline, and it's referred to as the Gap. And it's just a period in time in which all records, all knowledge of the events that happened during the Gap is just completely and totally lost. Even species that are long lived and individuals that may have been alive during the Gap still suffer from this affliction, which prevents them from being able to remember exactly what happened. And it was sort of around that time that the world of Galarian disappeared, and all that was left in its place in the same orbit that it sort of followed around the sun is the Absalon station. So again, just it's kind of cool to have stuff like that. So having like this mysterious types of creatures that exist and nobody knows where they initially came from, because it may have been something that happened during the period known as the Gap. And then we got the Urog. So I do actually remember these things. When I was running Starfinder, one of the players really wanted to play one of these, and they have, I believe they have like a resistance to electricity attacks. So what this player would always do was he had this weapon that had a critical. It was his gun had a critical ability that allowed it to arc. It was a lightning-based attack and would allow it to arc to a second target. But he had this really bad habit of rolling critical fumbles, and I did have the critical fumble and critical hit decks for Starfinder, which we were using. And one of the things that ended up happening was his weapon discharge expended an entire battery, but basically it did damage to everybody in a certain radius. But he was resistant to the point where he barely took any damage. But I think one of the other players was actually dropped unconscious from that critical fumble. So I'll always remember that about the Urog there. And then we got Starwolf. I know it's not actually Starwolf, but I'm just going to call it Starwolf. Again, these guys, multi-limbed creatures. And then we have our NPC gallery. So those were like the species detailed in here. And yeah, so we just have information on using these, dropping them into your campaigns, adjusting their challenge rating, changing their species. And you can do things like, it's called graphs. So for certain creatures, graphs are basically a template that you can apply to them. As opposed to like giving them necessarily like straight class levels or things like that, you can give them a graph which changes their abilities to sort of mimic either certain class types or other types of creatures. So essentially like the dragons in Starfinder, they give you like one set of like a base stat, and then you have the graphs that you can apply to that base form, which can do things like alter its breath weapon and resistances and things along those lines. So it's just a way of sort of customizing them. So we got our bounty hunters, notorious bounty hunters. So you do get a few different levels of various challenge ratings. We got the celebrities. So we have a streamer, video gamer, performer, influencer. We got charlatans, which some influencers, do kind of fall into that category, but that's a whole other thing. Diplomats, emergency workers. So again, something that you may want to consider there. Pilots, rescue, like first responders type of thing. Cool stuff there. Former military. So we got combat medic, Quartermaster, Officer, Spec Ops, Veteran. That guy's got to be Spec Ops. Again, I love the artwork in here. Guides, if you need. Personal concierge. So if you're staying at a hotel or somewhere like that, you can use them. There's couriers, stow-alongs. And then Captain's Club Guide. Infiltrators, so hackers, double agents, shapeshifters, and spies. Investigator, so we have the conspiracist, the psychic seer, detective, and paranormal investigator. So we have full-on medical staff here. So we have physicians, psychic healers, EMTs. I guess the other ones may have been like almost like a police force kind of thing. Special forces medic. Religious figures, the divine avatars. That's got to be a divine avatar. I don't care. It's a divine avatar of the giant space jellyfish. Scholars, postgraduate student, subject expert, so field biologist. Again, you might need these for not necessarily enemies, but if the players are consulting somebody or trying to get information from somebody or learn certain things, then yeah, going to a subject expert, or even if you're trying to learn something that's going on at a university like you did early on in Dark Suns or Dead Suns, then yeah, having this postgrad student might be handy. And you also have a Scholar of Magic. We got the sports figures. It's the Battle Flower Master. That's got to be that guy there. Stewards. Survivalist, the Off-Gridder. Love that. Career Ranger. Mysterious Hermit. I'm sold on that one. And then we got the Thieves, the Phantom Thief. Again, I want to say this is the Phantom Thief because it's little leshy type creatures, which I love. We got pickpockets, muggers, safecrackers. And then we got the Tyrants, including the Underworld Mastermind, Hierarch, Fortunate Warlord, Singularity Accelerationist. And then we just have our index and our advertisement for the Galactic Magic book and the Drift Crisis book, and we have the same artwork that we had at the inside cover there. So that was the Interstellar Species. Again, if you want me to focus on any of these specific elements in a bit greater detail, I'll be more than happy to do that. But overall, I really love this book. When it comes to Paizo, their supplements, their rule books, they're always really well done. They're usually really well thought out. They have some really cool new options. There's always something that you may want to add to your games in these books. And this is just a fantastic resource to have, especially I would say for players and game masters alike, just to have some more options. The evolutionist class is kind of cool because it is a bit adaptive. There's things you can do to alter your character to deal with certain situations when you get into a combat scenario, which is kind of neat. And you do have new options for some of the pre-existing classes already, including just some options that may be available based on your species to certain classes that may have a strong affinity for them. It's just overall a really solid book, and having tons of NPCs that you can throw into your game, again, super useful. There's information on adjusting their challenge rating. There's stuff in the core rulebook as well for altering creature stats if you need to. So it's just a really useful resource all around. And if you are into Starfinder, be it a player or a game master, this is a book that I highly, highly recommend. It's absolutely fantastic, chock full of cool stuff for you to use for your character or to sort of spice up your game. With the species having the unique abilities sort of presented with them, such as weapon and equipment, spells or feats or alternate species traits, is really, really cool to have, and something that I would use as a game master to sort of differentiate some of the NPCs that they may encounter from sort of the more standard versions of that species that they might be used to dealing with from adventures past. Really solid book, really fantastic, highly recommend it. And yeah, just great stuff, and I can't thank Paizo enough for sending this to me. And if you are into Starfinder, like I said, I highly recommend this. Anyway, thank you guys very much for taking time out of your day to watch this video. Let me know in the comments below if you've picked this book up, what elements have you been able to use, be it as a player or a game master, or, you know, what would you want to try if you had this book, or if you have this book and haven't had a chance to put it into practice yet. Let me know all that stuff in the comments below. And if you want me to do a more detailed video on The Evolutionist, let me know that as well. I'll be more than happy to. Anyway, once again, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it, and I will see you all next time. Until then, take care.